Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. Last week we talked about all of the assets that evade in Arkham Horror, the card game. Someone in the comments said, hey, what about a follow-up that looks at the events and skills? So that's what we're doing this time. And I like to introduce these videos a bit by talking about just some thoughts going into the cards. What am I looking for? What am I thinking about when we look at the event and skill cards? And we have to go back to last week. Last week we talked about the assets, and my takeaway was I don't know how much I want to evade in this game that actually warrants putting an asset into play. Remember, you spend an action, probably resources, to put an asset into play, which is a preemptive thing. It's saying that I am going to have a problem in the future that is solved by this card. Events and skills, which are kind of the same thing, they stay in your hand until you need them. In other words, they are more reactive to the game state. You don't need to waste your time playing them unless they actually do something for you. Now, the drawback, of course, is that they only do something once, and then they go in your discard pile, and they're gone forever, unless you're a survivor or you can draw through your deck a million times. Forget about that. Most of these are balanced around the idea that they are one-shot effects. So compared to assets, they should be a little bit more powerful, and they're a little bit cheaper to play, but we actually want to put them in our decks or not, right? One of the other things to think about is that assets in general are good in a deck that is around them. It's built around, this is an evade deck. This is a dirty fighting deck. This is a Rita Young deck. Sorry, Rita, last week I didn't talk about you enough. Finn Edwards, right? These are cases where you actually want to evade as part of your strategy. And evading is good, of course, in those decks. But when we look at the card pool as a whole, there aren't that many synergies outside of, say, Rogue and maybe some Survivor. So we had to really think hard about, like, why does a Mystic want to put an ass into play to evade more than once? Uh, for the most part, I think evasion is good when you deal with a large enemy that you can't handle in one round. That doesn't happen more than a few times, so evasion is good for those cases, but it seems to make more sense to me to put them into skills or events, and that's what we're going to talk about here. Now, the competition for an asset that is doing some evasion, of course, is, well, other kinds of assets in play, most notably the ones that just defeat the enemy, and dealing damage is usually better, not always. There's never absolutes in this game, but you have to compromise, right? You have to say, I can only put so many assets into play because they take up slots. And of course, every card has the deck slot competition issue. So does this card do enough for the 1 out of 30 or so cards that I get? Now, events or skills that evade are maybe more compelling as a one shot, but the competition is with something different now. One, with a basic evade altogether, because for the most part, if you're only doing this a few times, why take up that deck slot? Because you can always do a basic evade if you're good enough at that. And the investigators that have, say, a 5 or maybe 4 in agility can do basic evades with not much more help. The compelling part about assets is for mystics that allowed them to use a different skill altogether, allowed them to use willpower. Um, so why bother doing an event or skill in Rogue or in Survivor when you can kind of just do this anyways? You can pass an evasion test. Most events, as we'll see, don't give you a bonus to your evasion. They don't give you, like, this test, you get +2 or something to your agility. That just doesn't happen too often. We'll see some exceptions, but by and large, it's not like fight events that basically give you a big bonus. Not all fight events, but weapons, of course, do that too. The other thing that you need to think about when deciding whether or not to put an event or skill into your deck that does an evasion is, couldn't I just put a skill card that was more useful in more cases? Like just a skill card that has agility icons on it. Manual dexterity, right, is useful not just for your evasions, but for treacheries, for locked door, right? So that's just like a better card than something that just says you only can use this for evasion. Also, wild icons. Unexpected Courage, of course, is your baseline, but there are lots of other um, also other skills that give you lots of icons that are wild and that can be used for anything. Could be for evasion this round, could be for something else. So while the agility icons that could be stacked up on skill cards that are not just manual dexterity, like what's the guardian one? Not combat training. That one just gives you bonuses that way. I forget the name of it. It's a defensive stance. There it is. Defensive stance. Of course, you could also say that the competition could be with other ways to improve your agility score too. So that's something to keep in your mind. Like, is this something I could just do better with because it's a more generic card that's still powerful enough for what I basically want, which is the evade an enemy, disengage, exhaust? Or are the cards trying to entice you with something more, right? More than just an evade. We saw this with the assets. We got, I think, about 5 different versions of this. So you weren't just evading, because evading on its own is kind of the weakest thing as far as you could do on a regular basis. So sometimes, like Miss Aurelia, we got the investigator moves after this test. Sometimes it was the enemy moves after this test. That's what was on Shroud of Shadows. Often and more recently, we've gotten a lot of the enemy doesn't ready in the upkeep phase. So you're basically evading it for 2 rounds. That only seems to happen with non-elite enemies. I think that's just a basic concept that the game has, that the elite enemies always ready when they normally should, and then they don't move on their own. Sorry, you cannot move them. They can only move on their own because sometimes they need to be at a certain location. Another thing we saw was an action refund. Something like Blur gave you back that action. Finn Edwards, of course, likes that because now he can use his extra evade action for essentially anything. I think someone in the comments made that point very well. And then the last one, which might be the most useful, is the dealing damage part. So Ineffable Truth allowed you to deal 1 damage, 2 if you upgraded all the way, which essentially turned these into combat type cards as well. So they're not just get rid of the enemy for now, but let me soften it up a bit and I can deal with it over a few rounds. So usually 1 damage, sometimes 2. I don't think we've got anything else that does 2 other than that level 5 card. So those are 5 ideas, right, of how to get more out of your evade card. Let's see if we run into any more with the skills and events that we'll see here. I will make one last note for us to think about. Some cards we'll see do automatic evasions. We saw them before too, versus the ones that are actually skill tests, that are evasion skill tests. The automatic evasions are good, right? That's just a really handy thing that the game can do. The successful ones are usually better because sometimes the cards, like in a scenario, care about, did you successfully evade this enemy by 2? If so, get rid of the enemy or something like that. Not always, but just keep your eye out for that. Most of these are going to be automatic evasions if they are some other test that's being initiated and you get evasion as another bonus. So we're going to see events and skills that do both things. Ones that initiate evade tests and also ones that just have evade as part of the effects. I will point out as we transition over to Arkham.build that it is very rare to see skills. What you're going to see more often is events. I believe there's only 4 skills here. They're all lumped in our page, but you're also going to notice very big differences in the number of cards per class. All right, that's why we're not doing a separate one with skills. There's only 4. Okay, let's dive in. The first one here is Bolas. This one came from the Scarlet Keys. This is an evasion using combat, and if you succeed, you can attach it to a non-elite enemy. It gets -1 evade value, which is weird, because why would you need to continue to evade this thing? Oh, it's because it doesn't actually get rid of the enemy. It allows the enemy to move, gets exhausted again, and then you can continue to evade it for whatever reason. I've never played this card. It's kind of cute, right? If it's a hunter or something, I suppose you keep it from readying ever. But if you're staying in one place with this enemy, it just needs to be evaded again. It seems fine for solo if you're dealing with, say, the snakes in the Forgotten Age that you want to evade all the time. Maybe some other enemies. I think it's okay. By the way, we are going to see some other cards that are kind of like this exhaust effect that are not really evades. If they come up, I'll point them out. But note that this you evade it once and then it exhausts. Doesn't disengage after it moves. It moves, engages you, exhausts. So it's like it's not going to bother you, but it's still engaged with you, so you can't quite get rid of it. All right, next one, Sweeping Kick. This is a fantastic card. We're going to see a lot of cards that are like this, that have some, if you succeed, automatically evade the attacked enemy. And this is a really cheap one in Guardian. Allows you to combine two skills, so that this is a bonus for fighting, of course. And then you get to just automatically evade the enemy. Bosses too, right? You do 2 damage, essentially. You could load this up with other combat skills like Vicious Blow, and then you just get to evade the enemy. So this is really what this card is for dealing with large enemies. It's fine to deal with small ones if you have no other choice, but it's really just there to deal with bosses. So that's really nice. Throw the book at them. I spoiled this card when we did a preview for Feast of Hemlock Vale. I still have yet to play it. This is a very similar card to what we just saw. Choosing a tome asset, you get plus X combat, and then if you succeed, you can automatically evade the attacked enemy. It only does 1 damage, but of course this is a level 0 card in Seeker. And your bonus isn't going to be super, well, your skill value is probably not going to be super high in Seeker. So that was kind of my knock on this card. Yeah, it has this other tome stuff on it, but never mind. The point of this is that you can use it at least sometimes as a Sweeping Kick variant. 1 damage plus an automatic evade is, well, we'll see other ones that are like this, but it's kind of meh. But my biggest issue was outside of, say, Joe, Vincent, I don't know how many other investigators we could pull off with this anymore. You're just not getting high enough. Compared to, say, Sweeping Kick, you're probably using your combat, which is 4, probably more with other boosts in play, and then 1 with Leo Anderson. But even 2, 3 with other investigators gets you to a nice number. Like, you'd like this to get up to 7 or 8 on standard. Throw the book at them. It better be a big book. I mean, there are some that are going to give you +5, but still. All right, Transmogrify. This is more like it. Here is how the Seeker doesn't deal with bosses, but deals with not only enemies that they are stuck with, right? So note the difference from the beginning when I said, okay, mostly you want to evade because you're dealing with a large enemy that you can't deal with in 1 round. You don't want them to attack back. This just says I'm going to solve the enemy without dealing with it ever again, kind of, because it won't move. If it's a hunter, it won't move. But I'm also dealing with it on my own using the stat that I like best, Intellect. All right. It has some other cool stuff here, like you can milk it for clues. It's a really nice card just to have in your back pocket to say, look, here's a 3 or 4 health enemy that would be really annoying if it chases after us the entire scenario. Let's not do that. You play the Transmogrify, and you're good. Okay, I moved myself over here in the corner so you can get a better balance on the screen. Okay, Persuasion's one of my favorite cards here. As you can see, it actually does evade. It evades elite enemies, which, if you remember from earlier, that's kind of why I like having evasion cards in the deck. It doesn't give you a particularly good shot at it, though, right? The taboo version, by the way, allows you to pick any enemy, I think, not just humanoids. So I don't think it's a particularly good card if you're trying to use it for that automatically evade an elite. However, it does solve the general problem of I'm off in some corner for whatever reason. I drew an enemy that is a problem. My fighter can't come over and deal with it, so I'll just play this. It's just not as good of a solution as, say, Transmogrify. It's probably going to be a more difficult test, but potentially this solves problems that Transmogrify doesn't, such as an enemy with Doom on it. Doom goes away. You're probably happy about that. Okay, some upgrades. Existential Riddle, very, very strong card. This one, again, deals with non-elite enemies. It, again, technically evades the enemy, but really it's doing something else. It's that it makes the enemy gain aloof and doesn't bother you for the rest of the scenario. I think it's kind of to some extent, it's an upgrade from the Transmogrify card. It's different, but it's very strong. In fact, because it allows you to choose weakness enemies, that's really nice. I guess this does too. Yeah, good cards. Confound. I'm a big fan of this card. It is 3 XP, so it better do a lot. It gives you clues while you evade enemies, and then it doesn't ready during upkeep. So if we're kind of looking back to our bag of tricks that Evasion usually does, we've seen the deal 1 damage, right? This is kind of dealing 1 damage. I mean, it is. This one allows you to get a clue at the same time. That's new. This one is this just deals with elite enemies. It's not really part of the card. This one, attached enemy gains aloof, only really could happen with an event, right? But that's crazy good. And this one gives you 2 clues, and it doesn't ready during the next upkeep phase, so that's pretty incredible. Okay, so Seekers have a nice collection, unsurprisingly. We'll come back to some assets later that sort of fit this one-shot idea. Disc of Insomnia is kind of the classic here, where it's a one-shot automatically evade the enemy or discard it at level 2. It's the same idea. You're solving the enemy that you drew in some way. Okay, moving on to the rogues. As you can see, we have 53 cards to get through here. I think we've done quite a few. So Vamp, this is just, again, a test that has an automatic evasion attached to it, but then you get to move that enemy to a connecting location if it's non-elite. I like that you can still do it. You can still automatically evade the enemy if you do that test. So that's nice. If it's elite, and if it's non-elite, then you get to move it, which is quite good. In fact, it's so good, they revisited the idea with Bum's Rush that just came out in the Drowned City. This one is an evasion test. If you succeed by 2 or more, you deal the enemy 1 damage. We've seen that before. And again, you get to move the enemy away, so it won't bother you. I find this effect to be good if you're leaving 2 to put yourself with a little more distance. If you're just kicking the guy out of the bar here, and then next round he hunts back in, it's maybe even worse than leaving him in the location to begin with, because if he's in the same location, you could evade him again. If he's not, but he's just going to hunt in, then you get attacked, probably. Really depends on the scenario, right? Because if you can move away, then it's even better. If you're kind of stuck in a corner and he comes back in, that's less good. Okay, Sneak By. This is a very classic, simple card. You do an evasion attempt with no bonuses. You get 2 resources to use potentially on that test. So there's cards like Streetwise that you could then funnel into having a bonus to your agility. Very nice card. Allows you to get some money, fuel a lot of stuff. Good icons for Crystallizer of Dreams. Should mention that, of course, when we talk about events, there's lots of event synergy out there, right? And Crystallizer of Dreams is one. Chuck Fergus is another one. If you want to turn these events into quasi assets, anything that recurs by putting it back into your hand, or we'll see those upgrades in a second, makes them more like assets. But then maybe you get some other benefits from them being events. Nathaniel Cho, obviously, we saw before with Sweeping Kick, I think is the only choice for here for his normal card pool, but maybe Marion can take some of these things. Not the tricks, but maybe there were a few things here. All right, that one's good. Notice there's no bonus to your skill value. Bum's Rush did give you a bonus. Vamp doesn't give you a bonus, but assumption is that the parlay is going to give you a bonus in some way with other cards. Slip Away does give you a bonus. So when you add your intellect to your skill value, so it's basically the same idea as Bum's Rush. You just add a different thing, cost the same too. This one, if you succeed by enough, you get to deal the enemy a damage. This one, if you succeed by enough, it doesn't ready during upkeep. So Again, it's like your disguise versus your ineffable truth. The Bums Rush has this extra thing of moving it away, which is cool. I think the assumption is that you don't need to succeed by 2 to do that. Oh gosh, this is poorly templated. Are these completely separate from each other, or is that enemy referring to the previous sentence? I don't know, man. Okay, and then you see Cheap Shot, which is the reverse of all of these, inverse, I suppose. It's a fight. Add your agility to your skill value. If you succeed by 2 or more, automatically evade the attacked enemy. So it's essentially the same thing as Bums Rush, but it helps you with fighting. I mean, there are slight differences, right? So this one allows you to do the automatic evasion on an enemy that is engaged with a different investigator. Evasions normally, so this is an evade test, can only be with enemies that are engaged with you. And notably, since this is a fight, you can only commit icons that match the fight. In this case, you can do things like Vicious Blow if you're Skids or Tony or Jenny, and that's good. There's less ways to do extra damage with the evasion version of this, at least where we are right now in the card pool. Eavesdrop is not an evasion. Breaking and Entering, you can see these cards are all just slight tweaks on the formula. Just who can take them and why you would want to is going to change. So this is an investigate. You get a clue for your automatic evasion. Well, it's the other way around. You get the clue if you succeed. If you succeed by 2, you get the automatic evasion of any enemy at this location. This one and Cheap Shot go hand in hand, right? They're there to get an enemy off of another investigator. Could be you. Could be you. But this one gives you basically this extra clue, where Cheap Shot gives you the extra damage. I wonder if one day we'll get a spell that does clue and an evasion. We have it with one of the archaic glyphs for Seeker, but I wonder if Mystic will get that at some point. This is not evasion. This is quick getaway. Allows you to combine an evasion with a dodge. It's interesting because you still succeed on an evasion attempt, so you will disengage and exhaust that enemy. It will, if this is happening during the enemy phase, it will just, well, ready again. So it's sort of okay. I don't know how this works with massive enemies, right? Because massive enemies can attack multiple investigators. I think this will cancel that if you evade it first, so it won't continue to attack all the rest of them, but I'm not totally sure. So there may be something about the timing, like if it initiated the attacks, it continues them, even if it exhausts in the middle. I don't know. This is like it's for Kimani Jones, I think, for the most part. It's not great, but it is a kind of expensive dodge. It's fine, but it's only works as an event, right? Because it's one of these play when an enemy attacks you. I guess it's a free evasion. So for Kamani, right, you can then discard the enemy in the enemy phase, that's kind of neat. Okay. Decoy, very simple card. Allows you to automatically evade non-elite enemies. Could be at your location. Pay more for it to be more enemies. Pay more for it to be at locations up to 2 connections away. This one's quite strong, I think. Again, you're using this, I mean, automatically evading enemies is great. It's sad it doesn't work on elites. Probably shouldn't. But you're using this to get someone out of trouble. And if you have a lot of money, you'll pay for that. Compare it to, say, Stray Cat, what we saw before. It's a very similar idea, but you don't need to pay the resource to put into play or the ally slot. This can just sit until you need it. All right, upgrades. Not surprisingly, there are upgrades to a few of the cards that we just saw. Let's just take a look at them first before we go to Under Surveillance. Level 2 Cheap Shot, this time you succeed by 1 or more, you get the automatic evasion. Before it was 2. If you succeed by 3, you can recur this. Returns to your hand at the end of your turn. slip away, exactly the same thing. Now it's funny. For this one, do you really want to recur this? Starts to look like an asset. Eh, not as important as, say, Cheap Shot, which I think fits into, I mean, it's expensive, but it fits into an idea that you can use this to keep attacking the big enemy. And maybe that gets you out of problems. I don't think this one, because you basically have told the enemy to kind of screw off for the next round anyway. How many times do you need to do this, right? It's You don't need to evade it the next round, so you're basically, I don't want to say clogging up your hand because there's probably other things you could evade, but it's just a little bit more awkward for this to return to your hand. Breaking entering though, card's just really good. This allows you to, let's say there's a boss or something on the last location of the game, you can slowly but surely get the clues by doing the breaking entering, evade the enemy, keep working on the location or whatever, and then do it again next round. That's fantastic. Very, very strong add. Obviously, for these cards that have add two skills together, it becomes very interesting for investigators that get to 8 or 9 pretty easily. Assets don't get that, right? Assets don't have you get +5 unless you have, you know, level 4 or 5 weapons. But this, because it costs a little bit, but it costs the card usually, it's easier to see that this could be your whole shtick. This is how I evade enemies instead of playing an asset. It kind of works like one, but I like it better because it does a bit more. Vamp, this upgrade one allows you to do all of these things instead of just one. Uh, you don't need to do them all, right? The evasion is a cool thing, but it's probably not why you're playing this card. Okay. Under surveillance, this technically evades enemies. Actually, quite well, right? This one gives you the clue and does not ready during upkeep. It's neat because it's a remote evasion card. There's another one that's sort of like that. Doppelganger? I don't know. We saw something like that before. Or maybe that's a mystic card. Oh, we don't have it. I thought there was one that let you do an action. Maybe that is doppelganger. Well, anyway. I think that's a strong idea, right? You can engineer this a bit, but it could even just be at your location and you don't leave, right? You can just stay there, and then an enemy hunts in. You get the clue. You automatically evade the enemy. It stays off of you. You can beat it the next turn. It's expensive. 3 resources is not nothing, but I think this is a nice card for. I mean, even just like, I mean, you have to know, right? I don't think you just play it. Well, you could just play it if you want. I'm thinking that, like, do you want to know that an enemy is coming via hunter keyword, or that you draw one from the deck, right? Let's say your seeker runs off somewhere, plays this card because they think they're going to be there for a round or two. Do you play it, or do you just leave it there and then get the clue later? And it's a bit tricky to play, which is why I think people don't put this into that many decks. But I think in a larger player count, Preston likes this. I think there's a lot of uh, nice things from that card. Like nothing on that reads bad. It's just one that you need to make sure happens. Okay, move on to Mystic. String of Curses. It's an automatic evasion. Any enemy at your location that's non-elite, you get a clue off of it. There's the evasion part. The defeat part is kind of cute too. But yeah, I mean, I'm discovering this along with you, perhaps, that so many of these events have evasion stapled to clue getting. That's good. That makes the cards worth running much more. It's a nice card. I think this is a strong card for most investigators that have a way of, I don't know, like have a way of either leaving the location or getting help soon. But the fact that it's a spell, it's practically free, I think makes it do a lot. Now, the other part about killing enemies that have Doom on them is really good. That's why I think cards that have a couple of things on them is really nice. Okay. Why is Power Word here? Probably the evade value is, yeah, distract. It automatically evades enemies. I don't want to talk about this card too much. It's good. It feels like an asset, right? Because it actually happens more than once, sort of. They can evade themselves. Let's move on. Blinding Light. This one and its level 2 upgrade are core set cards, so maybe we should be giving more attention to them. So this one uses willpower instead of agility. Okay, we've found our first card that is like that. What happened to Ethereal Form, by the way? I just skipped it. Okay, we'll come back to it. So this is like the Mystic Spells that do the same idea. If you succeed, deal 1 damage. Hey, it's Ineffable Truth again. But then there's a blowback. If you get any of those symbols, you lose an action. That's rough. If you think about which spells make you lose an action, it's Rite of Seeking does. The Brand of Cthulhu does, right? But for Evasion, there's nothing like that. They make you discard cards or take damage or lose resources or something, I think. This is bad because a lot of the time when you're evading, you want to evade and then leave. You don't want to accidentally get yourself out of that problem or not being able to move again after. It could be action 1, maybe you have more actions. It's perhaps not a problem, but I think this one is cool because it does deal damage and it's cheap. But oh my goodness, you do not want to lose actions in this game. Rite of Seeking is nice because you can avoid it for the most part, right? You can play it or use it last. Brand of Cthulhu, you can just succeed by more. And Blur, right, gives you actions because that's the whole point of making up for the downside of Evasion. This one takes the actions away from you potentially. Yikes. Well, what about the upgraded one? I'll come back to Ethereal Form, don't worry. This one is the same, except for if you reveal one of those symbols, you take a horror also. Ugh. Now, you do get to deal an extra damage. Dealing 2 damage is better than 1, but... and maybe you just kill the enemy that way, I don't know. But probably the horror is not awful in Mystic. I think that the action is still the worst part. I would, if I were using this, I would consider the cancel token archetype just because it's just not what you want to do. I think the card is also really good because it's only costs 1. Yeah, if you could compare this to Sweeping Kick, and we can, I know that they're in different classes. That card is interesting because it allows you to do a fight and then get the automatic evade. This does the 2 damage, gives you kind of a bonus to your sort of to your skill value, but it's just like worse, right? And that's fine. Like Mystic cards should be worse than Guardian cards for dealing with enemies. It's just got a pretty harsh penalty. Interesting though how I don't want to say they're similar, but they feel like the Guardian one just needs to be a lot better, and it is. Okay, back to level 0, Ethereal Form. This one is more like the Sweeping Kick because you're adding skill values. If you succeed, disengage from each other enemy engaged with you, and for the remainder of the round, you are ethereal. Enemies cannot engage or be engaged with you, and you cannot attack or deal damage to enemies. Whoa, okay, this is an effect we haven't seen before. What the? I played this a little bit, but this whole idea of becoming ethereal is intriguing. The problem, of course, is a lot of times you evade an enemy and you now want to keep attacking it. But this is your get out of dodge free card where you get to evade something and then you can walk wherever you want. Don't worry about things, right? Potentially, it's now someone else's problem if you're playing multiplayer. In solo, it seems pretty reasonable to do this, but it's just an interesting effect. It's not as good as the Read the Sign Spectral Razor suite that this comes in. I mean, those cards are just very good, but this one does something that the other cards we've seen don't do yet, which is get other enemies off of you. If I recall correctly, none of the assets do this. So, pretty good. This is allowing you, we can add to our list of 5 things to say, I mean, we should add the clue to it also. And we should say that, yeah, evading other enemies that are engaged with you. I mean, they're not evading them, but to somehow get disengaged with other enemies is another really good effect that maybe you can only put into an event. Imagine if you could do this as an asset. Okay, and yet people don't play this, which probably is fair, but as an asset, I think would be a little bit nuts. There's an upgraded version that returns to your hand. Haven't seen anyone play it yet, but sure. Okay, some other things we get in the upgraded Mystic spells. Interestingly, they're all level 2 or below. Everything we've seen so far outside of Confound, I think, are Vamp level 3. Yeah, these are all solutions that are at low levels, which is healthy, I think, for the game. Like, you want them to have wide access, right? And there's probably not much they can think of that's like evade level 4. Okay. We were looking at Banish and Bind Monster. These are 2 cards that are also a bit underplayed. This one has a taboo, I think that is for any symbol being revealed, but this one allows you to move the enemy to any location in play. So it's not just the Shroud of Shadows move it one location away, but rather any location in play. That's pretty good. And then the symbol token revelation is you don't ready the enemy. So we've seen that one before. Only so many things that you can staple together on these cards, but sometimes we get some new things, right? Bind Monster at level 2, a little bit more expensive. This one has the same does not ready clause, but now it happens until you fail that willpower 3 test. So it's interesting. Banish, if you hit a symbol, it just happens. This one, potentially you get nothing, right? You can pass the original test, pay 3 resources, which I think is it's too steep. It's a Dunwich Legacy card, I get it. But allowing you to just test over and over again so the enemy never readies and never engages anyone ever again is pretty good. And if you fail, then it readies. That's fine, right? Yeah, I think this card is bad. This one is good. And it's funny, again, seeing them as events, they're one shots, but they are, so some of them return to your hand, but they have some pretty powerful effects, which I think is nice. Nice for evasion. All right, we're almost at the end. We've gotten to our survivor cards. Have we seen any skills yet? No, they're going to be at the bottom. All right, survivor. Survivor and Rogue are the 2 classes that we come to think of as having evasion built into their kit. They have more investigators who can get that number up pretty big. Thinking about Rita, Silas, Wendy, right, came in the core set with 4. And Rogue, of course, has their pickpocketing shenanigans. I actually want to go right to the core set card first. So Cutting Distraction came out in the core set, and it is very, very simple. Evade, so it's a bolded evade, automatically evade all enemies at your location. They just all get disengaged and exhausted, including elites. It costs you $5 though, and it probably should, because at a high player count, you could have 8 to 10 enemies. There's lots of crazy things can happen in this game. And that just solves the problem, and you move away and you say, wow, thank you, Preston, for all of your cash. Okay. Um, it's not a card I see run often because you don't really want to be in that situation, but it's nice to have a big splashy effect. It's like Dynamite Blast, but for evasion. Not as good, but it doesn't deal you 3 damage either, so you can make this work. Love the art. Now, recently we got Elaborate Distraction, which sounds very similar in the name. It's also costs a lot, 3 resources, but it does a little bit of a different thing, which is it enlarges the scope to looking at every enemy at your location and each connecting location, and you get to automatically evade those enemies if only if they're not elite. If they're elite, you have a choice. Sorry, you don't have a choice. If they're elite, 1 damage, which could be fine. Automatically evade all the non-elite enemies instead. And I assume this is just to put the brakes on the card a bit. You're spending 2 actions. It's cheaper than Cunning Distraction. You get the wider net to deal with the enemies. The deal 1 damage is still probably stronger because I'd rather automatically evade the elites. But I think it's just probably better that it doesn't because an elite enemy could be 1 location away. Playing a card to automatically evade it is we don't need that in the game. That's a bit much. Having a test is much better for that kind of shenanigans, like we saw for the Onyx Pentacle. Dealing no damage to enemies is good though. I like that. So it's a neat version. It's probably more versatile, but it doesn't have quite the same ceiling. Well, the ceiling is different, but it just doesn't have quite the same evasion ceiling. Okay, I did want to talk about this one. This is not actually an evasion card because it doesn't disengage from the enemy. At the same time, it does have a very similar exhaust the enemy, it doesn't ready during upkeep idea to it. So it's not evasion, but it can work on elite enemies, though they don't get the double evade. So that's stall for time. I think the card is good. I've played it a few times and I like it. Okay, more new things. Catch. This one looks like Anchor Chain. You discard an item asset that takes 1 hand slot from your hand or play area. You get +1 at +X, which is the cost of that item. And then if you succeed against a non-elite enemy, it doesn't ready during upkeep. That's fine. If you have fodder for this in play, then it's good. If you don't, then it's probably a steep cost. Again, I'd love this to work against elites, but it doesn't. This is not an evasion card, but it's a benefit for evasion. Potentially. Stall for time actually exhausts it too. All right. There's a trifecta of Winging It, Improvised Weapon, and Impromptu Barrier. These are the improvised cards that can be played from your discard pile. Winging It gives you an extra clue. Improvised Weapon gives you an extra damage. Evade gives you evade additional enemy at the same location. Cool. Wait, there's more? With evade X or lower, X is the amount you succeed by. What? All right, so this does nothing. I mean, the -1 evade is good. But you get an extra evade if the other enemy has an evade value, so the number on the right side of the card, that is equal to or lower than the amount you succeed by. So succeed by 3, you could evade another thing. Succeed by whatever is not really part of Survivor. Sometimes, but not by that much. So, yeah. I mean, look, the cards that allow you to play them from your discard pile are pretty cute because it goes around that idea of it's a one-shot event in my hand, right, that I need to hold on to. This one you get to use once or have it as fodder for some other discard stuff, and then you get to play it whenever because your discard pile is like another hand. But I wanted to do something more than have this contingency on the evasion. I wonder if they tested it without that last part and it was too good in the Forgotten Age. But I think that could stand to go away. There's just nothing else. There's nothing else that's like that in the game that requires you to get any benefit like that. I mean, that's not true. There's the level 3 green Thompson, but that's in green. Rogue cards care about you doing that. That is probably the point of you playing the card. I don't think that is why you need Impromptu Barrier. These cards don't do evasions. I mean, Makeshift Trap kind of does. It allows you to they can't move or make attacks opportunity. Yeah. All right. We're pushing the limits on this discussion. Exploit weakness. This is the one where if you get the difficulty down to 0, then you get to just discard the enemy. If it's elite, you automatically evade it and deal 3 damage. Holy cow, that's good. Yeah, you should play this card to deal with elites. It is cool for discarding enemies too, the non-elites, but an automatic evasion plus 3 damage is crazy good. And look, Shadow Light, the version of this for getting clues, gives you what, like an extra clue and then a remote clue, and it's busted. This is less so because getting clues is more important, but I mean, it's just good, right? I think you try to play to get that 3 damage and automatic evasion. That's nuts. You get both. You think you get only 1. All right. This is not an evasion card. It's again a benefit of, just like Belly the Beast was that we skipped. Bait and switch. Where did we miss the first one? Wow. I just forgot this card was here. Which is on brand. Okay, it's an evade test. There's no bonus. If you succeed, if the enemy is non-elite, evade the enemy and move it to a connecting location. It's the Shroud of Shadows thing. Cheap. So, it's interesting. Rita Young, her ability is to either deal damage to the enemy or you move, right? It's back to the old Mists of Relia or Ineffable Truth thing. But that's on her Investigator card. You get to use it over and over. Okay, so this one is like Shroud of Shadows because you move the enemy away if it's non-elite. I mean, that's good, right? If it's a hunter enemy, you put more distance, you get to move away. The problem with this one is I think it needs a bonus. It needs to give you like +1 or +2. I think it made less sense when Dungeon came out. I think with Rita, it's good. Is it good with Finn? I don't know how much I like this card. I know people think it's awful, but I'm actually not sure, right? Because if you're bothering to have an evade kit, this is probably good. I wonder if you can combo with Dirty Fighting, if the enemy leaves or not. There's an upgrade one. Let's think about more when we look at the upgrade. Okay, 3 XP. Exactly the same, right? Exactly the same, but we have an option, which is to switch locations with the enemy. So for 3 XP and an extra icon, I think. 2 icons? No, 1. For an extra XP, 3 XP, you get the option to do literally the same thing the level 0 version did, or you use it on a connecting locations enemy, and then you switch. So it gives you a free move and evades that enemy. The other one is kind of the same idea. You move the enemy away again, but this time you get to move also. I think it's overcosted. But I think these they read okay to me. Again, in the mindset that you want to do evasions. In the mindset that you are only using these cards for like a one-off thing, that's a lot of XP to put in. Compare it with Confound, right? Confound, you put in because you say, I'll use this at some point, and it gives me clues, and it doesn't ready. It's overcosted too. I think I almost like the level 0 version better. Fend off just solves an enemy. This is going to be a lot like handcuffs, but we should probably come back to. You get attacked, enemies evaded, can't ready. All right, that's simple card. Good for when that matters, right? But it's fast, right? I think that's good. Okay, what do we get out of events? These are cards that are special cards. So Kate Winthrop gets an evade, shuffle it into the encounter deck, kind of like the persuasion card. Okay, kind of. Beguile is its own archetype. You're doing evades here, and hopefully with your fine clothes. I don't want to talk about that card. It's not really part of it. And then I'm done running is just it's a Rita thing. Okay, let's look at the skills. So Hatchet Man is not an evasion card. It's a benefit for evading, sort of. Light-footed though. This doesn't initiate an evasion test, but it's only committed. It's mostly going to be committed to evasion attempts, and if you succeed, you get to evade another enemy at your location. Automatically evade it. So that's good. Like I draw an enemy, you draw an enemy. We're both at the same location. I could evade mine, engage yours, evade yours. That's my whole turn. Or I just commit this, I evade mine, I evade yours, and now we both are free to leave the location or whatever. Good. Nice that Rita can take it, obviously. But you can run this and get lots of mileage out of it. Stunning blow. It's kind of a similar idea. This one's fun because if it's during an attack, you get that basically the boss effect, right? I attack an enemy that is big, and I get to automatically evade it, and now it is no longer going to bother me for the rest of the turn. I can continue to attack it because it has retaliate. Won't attack me back if I fail. It's a skill card, right? So if you think about like why you want to run these cards versus the other ones, they're free and they can be stacked with other things, right? Biggest thing you can think of here is a big weapon that you use, any weapon really, will allow you to more likely hit the test, right? And a machete gives you +1, a bigger gun gives you +1,000,000, right? Compare it to the events like bait and switch as a bad example. This gives you nothing. You're just evading at whatever your skill value is. Now, there's other ways to, bump those numbers up, so it's not a deal breaker, but it's nice that skill cards get to add to things you already are doing. So Silas, right, really likes this because he can commit it from his discard pile on an Elder Sign with Gift of Nodens. Oh, this is really good with Gift of Nodens, right? Because it's basically always at hand. Nice card. All right. We skipped. Oh, no, we didn't skip. There's level 0 Survival Instinct, which is worth talking about. This one is, I guess I should have searched for evading or evade without the E. This one is successful during evasion attempt. Then you may immediately disengage from each other enemy and move to a connecting location. So those other enemies are still ready, and they will potentially engage a different investigator at that location, but you get a free move. Very good card. The upgraded one is better. This one allows you to evade all those enemies and then move. So this one combines a couple things, right? It's combining the movement and it's combining the evade other enemies. When you play this and you hit, you are very, very happy. When you play this and you fail, game over, man. This one's very similar. This one has to be during a basic evade action. So all the stuff I said a minute ago about an evade being stacked with some asset in play, it goes out the window. But still, it gives you the succeed by 2, evade some other enemy at your location. This one doesn't have to be ones that are engaged with you, so it's like light-footed, similar, right? Another enemy at your location. So this one and Survival Instinct are different, but the ceiling on this one is just higher. I like the move. The move is very important, I think. All right, what did I miss? What happens if I just put this? We have 2 more cards. One of them is, I think, the one we just saw. And there's something else I missed. So evading instead of evasion or evade. Not immediately seeing this. Ah, grizzled. That doesn't really count. The evade value or whatever. Okay. Let's see if we type in evasion instead. Only 25 cards? Is there anything that we missed? Doppelganger. Okay. I knew there was something kind of weird. Cute. Yeah, okay. I think I talked about it before already. Dumb luck doesn't count. These are skill cards that help you evade. I mean that they're icons, right? So daring is good. It helps you do an evade. Fighting lessons is fine. And then long shot could be used during an evasion. Okay. They don't actually do evasions themselves. I mean, they're just icons, right? So the last thing I wanted to mention was a couple of the ones from last time that we sort of glossed over because they weren't really one-shot effects. So we can look at handcuffs. So this is an asset, of course, so I got to bring back the assets. And there's 2 of these, right? The level 0 version, again, this evades the enemy, and then the enemy cannot ready, so similar to fend off. The level 2 version is the same, except for it removes Doom, and it's fast to put into play anyway. Still an action to do the evasion. Yeah, they're essentially one-shot effects because it's like the what's the one existential riddle where you attach it to an enemy. That's essentially the same idea. The other one I was going to mention is Disc of Insomnia, the level 0 version. It's a one-shot enemy spawns, you automatically evade. So this is interesting. Like, what if we had a fast card? I mean, fast, this is not fast, but imagine if you had a fast card that said, when an enemy spawns, play this, enemy gets discarded or automatically evaded or something. That would be really interesting. This one requires you to spend a slot, 3 resources in action up front, but it's pretty good. Not really played too often. Was there another one on my list? Fire Extinguisher. These are also one-shot effects for evading enemies. So this one exiles, and this one you discard it to automatically evade all enemies. Good. This gives you out of a lot of problems. And then, unless I'm missing anything else, I think the last one is the Tennessee Sour Mash, the Survivor one. And this one gives you basically the cheap shot idea. You discard this, you fight with a big bonus, and then automatically evade if you succeed. Okay. That's it. Let's go back to the original list and go back to our events and skills. And I want to just wrap up by saying I think these are better than the assets for all the reasons I said before. What I learned today, and I didn't know before, is that there's a lot more of these cards that do something that the assets just don't do, that help you progress the game. You feel less bad about having one of these cards like Transmogrify or Confound or String of Curses or Breaking and Entering, because Evasion is good in a pinch, but you don't want it to waste your time. You'd rather get rid of the enemy by fighting it. You can't always do that. Not always plausible. But what if you could get a clue instead of dealing damage to it, right? So the fact that breaking, entering, and cheap shot are so similar, this one gives you 1 damage. Probably eventually need to do the damage, so it's not terrible. But this one feels really good because you are getting a clue, and maybe you just get out of there. Maybe you don't need to deal with the enemy anymore. It's funny because like fighting, dealing damage, and then evading the enemy is good for good for bosses, but basically nothing else because you'd rather have another way of dealing the rest of the damage. And it's not terrible, but so there's some really nice effects on these cards. I could see most investigators, if you're not running an evasion strategy, to put 2 copies of one of these. Just whatever makes sense with your investigator. There are some interesting ones. Like I really want to try out Banish some more because any symbol is like really good now. And this is this is really good, right? Move it to any location and play. Only works on non-elites, but this is where when I said I want my evasion stuff to work on elite enemies, once you start pushing the envelope a bit as to what the other benefits are, you start saying, I mean, I draw elite enemies, non-elite enemies all the time. Like, why wouldn't I deal with them in some fashion? So that is about it. I'm impressed with some of these Mystic ones. The Survivor ones are kind of okay. I think you can get away with just doing basic evades in Survivor most often because your skill cards are going to get you to pass the test more often. And we didn't really see anything here that was really that impressive as far as other effects, right? Not readying during the upkeep phase. I've told you before that I don't know. It's okay. Exploit weakness could just be a fight anyway, so whatever. Yeah. The rogue ones are pretty decent. Not surprising. The seeker ones are very good because they help your seeker not just get crushed by an enemy they accidentally drew. There's basically nothing in Guardian, although Sweeping Kick is fantastic. And then Mystic has some interesting ones, some intriguing ideas. For Mystic, again, the assets that are spells are cool because they let you use a number that you're really good at. In all of these, it's except for Ethereal Form, which adds, you do the same thing. So they're pretty playable without you committing to being able to pass those tests because you're probably already trying to pass willpower tests. So this is not a bigger ask. Survivor, sorry, Rita, I don't think these are doing much for you. Maybe bait and switch. Like that level 0 one, I'm kind of like, maybe. The skills are all good, though. The skills are all very, very good. Cool. All right, that wraps up this mini series of 2 videos that are about cards that evade, automatic evasion, initiating skill tests that are evasions. If you haven't played with some of these or many of them, give them another shot because they really do a lot in a scenario, especially with big enemies. And you feel a lot less pressure on your health if you can have not just wasting a basic evade that you may or may not pass, but you're able to use these cards to get a little bit more out of the situation. Always good to supplement this stuff with good skill cards. I think when I said earlier that many of these cards are asking, do you play them or do you just play defensive stance or survey the area or anything that has a bunch of wild icons on it? It's still a question, but probably you could stand having both because those other cards could be useful otherwise. All right, that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.